Hello and welcome. In today's video, we will be looking at how we can bring Navisworks sets into Power BI and connect them to a 3D model using Vcad. First, let's talk about why we want to do this. When connecting external data to the model elements in a report, ideally, we would want to connect the data directly to the items. However, sometimes a direct connection is not available. In these situations, selection sets can be very useful. Often teams already use selection sets to group objects together based on a number of different classifications. We can leverage this to connect external data and bring it into Power BI, connecting it to the model. Now, let's have a look at our specific example. So I'm going to pull up some data that I have. So here I have some WBSs. So I have my schedule. I have identified each WBS uniquely, and then I have a scheduled start, scheduled finish, then I have the actual completion dates. For each one, I also have a status. Now, if I want to bring this into Power BI and connect them to the model elements, I don't have anything that is available to me that can connect back to this data. So what I need to do is I need to create this bridge. Now, if we head on back to Navisworks, what I've done is I've brought in my model, and I've also preemptively defined a series of selection sets. And these, you can see, are named as WBS, the number, and then I have some description. And these basically group together elements based on the respective WBSs. Now, this is very simple to do in Navisworks. It's covered in a number of places, so I won't be showing you right now how to define sets, but I will show you how we bring these then into Power BI. So now that we have our actual selection sets ready to go, what we need to do is we need to make sure that once we bring this data into Power BI, we have again a way to connect them back to our model. Now, let's also have a look at the Power BI template generated by Vcad that I have prepared. So if I pull this up over here, you can see here I have my same model. So this is the exact same model that we're seeing in Navisworks. I've brought it in and I have all my data. Now, if I were to have a look at one of these elements, for example, I can see I have different properties available. And actually, probably the best way to go about this would be to have a look at the table view. And in the Vcad properties, here I can see all the properties of all the objects in my model. Again, the Vcad properties dataset has been covered before in many different videos, so I won't be going too much into detail into that, but I will show you what we're actually interested in. So what we want is something that can uniquely identify an object in my model. Commonly, this is done through the use of something like an element ID or an item GUID from Navisworks. So let's have a look if we actually have access to that. So most common use case would be I'm going to use item as a section, and then in the name, I'm going to use the GUID. Now, if I add this, you can see for some reason in my model, objects don't have an item GUID. Because of how the Navisworks model was generated, the various objects don't have them. The only element that has it is object ID 1, and I can tell you for a fact, in fact I'll show you, if we go over to assets and we have a look at object ID 1, this is the actual root of everything. So this is the actual file that was imported in Navisworks. So for some reason, beyond my possibility of changing, the Navisworks model that I've been provided with doesn't have item GUID for the various elements. Not to worry, there usually is some other sort of classification. Let's go ahead and I'll show you, for example, another common example would be using IFC GUIDs if it's the case of an IFC. And we can see that in this case, actually, we do have IFC GUIDs, but I also noticed that they tend to be repeated. This is probably because it's being assigned to multiple elements in the Navisworks object tree. And finally, another common example would be element IDs coming from Revit. Now let's have a look at what that would look like. So if I clear this, I go to section, I select the element ID, apply, and I can see here I have section element ID, name, and the actual value. And these look pretty good. These look fairly good. So it looks like I have access to this information. Now let's double check in my Navisworks model and make sure that this is the correct data to be using. So if I pull up Navisworks again, and I select, for example, AWBS, and let's actually select a specific object here. So we're going to go with this, this column over here. Here on the right, I can see these are all the properties. These properties here I have access to in Power BI as well through the Vcad datasets. So we can see here, for example, I have the name of the object, I have the type, and I have the icon. These are all things that I would find regularly in my Vcad datasets. And if we have a look, I also have an element ID, which corresponds to that section I just showed you. Then I have the property name, which is a name, and I have the actual value. So this looks exactly like what I want to use to connect my data from my model to the Vcad extracted data. So this is a bridge property that is unique for my objects. If I have a look and select other objects here in the tree, we can see the value of the element ID is changing. So this is unique, which is exactly what we want. And it's also present in the Vcad datasets. So great. So now what do we want to do now? So I've created the sets, which basically group together objects. Now I need a way of exporting these sets in a way that I can then bring into Power BI, and we're going to do that through the quick properties. I'm going to show you, I've already defined them. So to define the quick properties, what I would do is I would go over to the options, and in the options, opened in a wrong place. In the options, I forget, I think it's under interface. Yes, quick properties, definitions, and here I can define my various quick properties. You can see I've already set it up to select the element ID and the property name, which is great. This means that now, if I have a look at my selection inspector, what I get is a table where I have a row for each object in my selection set, and I can switch through the selection sets, and we can see this update. And so every time I select a set here I get the list of all the objects, and for these I get the various properties I've defined. Now I've already defined the element ID as I showed you, and also have item name and item type. I just add them as a description. It can be helpful, but it's not actually required for what we're doing right now. So we have this table, and now we need to export it. To export it, I can use this button up here, and I can export this data as a CSV file. This CSV file, I'm going to save in my folder over here, and in my folder, I'm going to give it a name that identifies the data based on its WBS. So you can see here on the bottom left, I selected WBS1. So I'm going to name it WBS1. And of course, you can see I've already prepared the files for all the WBSs. But basically what I do is I'd go through all of these sets. So let's go ahead and replace this. It's fine, you can replace it. I basically go through, select it, then export it, export the file, and give it the correct name. So this is WBS02. And so I'm calling this file WBS02. Go ahead and save it. I do this for all the sets that I've defined. I've already prepared that, so now we can switch over to our actual report and have a look at what these data sets actually look like. So let's head on over to Power BI. So let's go ahead and click on Get Data, and I'm going to say Text CSV, and then here it opened in the wrong screen. I'll move it over. So I'm going to select the WBS01 file, for example. So this will be my first bit of data that I'm going to be bringing in. And I'm going to go ahead and click on Open. Now, there'll be some cleaning up we have to do, but for now, this is pretty much good. So let's go ahead and head on over to Transform Data and finish the transformations we need to make. So once it's inside of Power Query, we can have a look at it over here. So basically what we want to do is, it's correctly named WBS01 because it's just pulling the name of the file. I do want to promote these headers, and you can see they're kind of ugly, so I probably want to clean this up. And the easiest way for right now, since it's a very simple file, I'm just going to go ahead and replace the value. So this, rather than being written like this, will be simply, you can see here there's some formatting that's going on. I just want this to be element ID dash name. I can go ahead and apply, and I'm going to repeat for these other column headers as well. So this will be item dash name. And finally, replace values. This will be item dash type. Unfortunately, when Navisworks exports the CSV data, it adds those carriage returns that in Power BI get read kind of weird, but now we have it, we're good. So I can go over to transform and then use first row as header. So this promotes the first row to a header, and there we have it. We have our actual data. Now what I want to do is basically repeat this for the various CSV files. I'm going to show you a quick trick to do this faster. So if I come over, because the data looks exactly the same, and we can have a look at them, but they're all structured the same, what I can actually do is I can just come over here, I can duplicate this query. I can rename it, so this will be WBS02. There we go. And also, I want to come back to the first step and tell it that it needs to pull the file WBS02. Okay, so now when I go to the last step, we can see I have the same exact structure, but the correct data coming from the two files, we can see it's different. Now I'm going to cut for a second and bring in all those data sets, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm back. I've repeated the same operation. You can see for all the WBS files, it's exactly the same steps, so went a little fast. Now, we want to bring these into a single data set that we can then connect to our model data. But there's one last thing we need to do. We actually need to be able to tell which one of these rows are coming from a specific WBS. So basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to add a custom column to this data set. So let's start with WBS01. And what I'm going to do here is basically go ahead and add a column. It's going to be a custom column. And in my custom column, this will be my WBS ID. So this will identify which WBS the row is referencing. And here, I'm simply going to add some text. So this is going to be, if I can add anything. So if I just type anything in here and press OK, you can see just adds a column where every row has the value I've typed in. What I want is to give it a value that can then map to my schedule data. So let's have a look at that schedule data again. So if I pull it up here, you can see here I have those IDs. So they're spelled like this, WBS01. Might as well do it exactly the same so I can then use it as a key. So let's return to Power BI. I'm going to edit this step again. And rather than, of course, anything in here, I'm going to type in WBS01. And go ahead and OK. So you can see now every row knows this. And I'm doing this because now when I repeat the operation on WBS02, for example, so also here I'm going to add a custom column. Call it exactly the same, so WBS underscore ID. These column names need to be the same, otherwise it's going to cause us trouble later on. So this will be WBS02. And confirm. I'm doing this because now when I go and merge the data for these two different tables, I'll be able to tell which rows are coming from which file. So again, I'm going to cut a second and repeat the operation for all the data sets and be right back. Here we are. So I've completed this operation. So I've added this WBS ID column to all my data sets. So now I'm finally ready to bring them all together. To do that, I'm going to select the first one. Under Home, I'm going to do Append Queries, and I'm going to append as a new query. From here, I can choose 3 or more tables, and I can actually go ahead and select all my other tables and add them in. So I'm going WBS 01 through 07, confirm, and this will create a single table with all that data, and importantly, my WBS ID over here. So let's rename this. This will just be all WBS. This will be fine. And then finally, we need to bring in our actual schedule data that I showed you earlier. So to bring that in, this is, again, a CSV file, so it's very simple. I'm just going to create a new source as a text CSV, and I'm going to pull the schedule, open it up. And here we can see in this case, Power BI already recognized the headers and everything, so I can just confirm. So this is my schedule, and this is my WBS's all. Now to keep the model view a little cleaner, I'm actually going to go ahead and remove these from load. So I'm just going to do enable load, disable it. What this means is basically it won't be loaded into my, oh, sorry, not delete. Careful about that. I need to do enable load. So what this is doing, you can see the text goes to italic. Basically, when I remove it from the load, it won't be present in the model view. It'll still be used in Power Query for all the dependent queries. So for example, all WBS will be refreshed if needed when I refresh it, but it won't be available in the model view. So let's go ahead and apply. Let everything load. And now if I head on back to my report and then the model view, here I should be able to see my new tables, and we have them over here. So WBS schedule and WBS all. Let's move them over. Okay, let's make some room. So now we can see Power BI already was able to match these. I did do a single direction filter. This is up to you. I usually like to have it bidirectional, except for very specific cases. So I'm going to go ahead and apply both here. Okay, so we have our WBS data in, and we've connected it to the schedule. However, we still need to connect it to the Vcad data itself. To do that, we need to build another bridge. So basically, let's go to table view, and let's review what we have. So our all WBS query here has basically an entry for every object in the WBS, its WBS ID, and the element ID for that data. We said earlier that in properties, we can also find the element ID. In fact, we can see it right here. So now we just need to create that bridge. So let's go back to Power Query once more and create these last data sets. So if I expand the Vcad table over here, let's collapse a bit of stuff, but what I'm actually interested in here is Vcad properties. The Vcad properties contains all the properties for all the objects. So I'm going to simply create a reference. I can move this down here so everything is up together. And this will be my Vcad properties. And let's put in a dash element ID, just so I know what this table is actually doing. Now I want to go ahead and filter based on the section. And here I'm going to pull up the element ID. And just to double check, this is going to be the name. And then here I have the actual values that I want. So I can go ahead and select object ID, value, and remove the other columns. And I'm simply going to rename this column over here. There we go. And this will be my element underscore IT. Go ahead and confirm. And there we have it. So now I have a query which maps the element IDs from Navisworks with the object IDs from the Vcad data. So I could bring this back into Vcad assets, but for now, we're just going to keep it simple. I'm just going to go ahead and apply. This all will transform again the queries when needed. And if we go back to our report in the model view, now we have this new query over here, Vcad properties element ID. Let's make this a little larger. Power BI already connected it to my Vcad asset table through the object ID. And now I simply need to connect the element ID with the element ID in all WBSs. So this connection is perfect. Let's make this bidirectional, confirm. And there we have it. And now we've basically connected the schedule to the elements and to the Vcad data. So if we go back to our report, now what we can do is I can actually clear out this table for now. and I can drop in my schedule data. So let's go ahead and add in the schedule, and we can add the WBS ID. And maybe I can count the number of objects for each WBS. So for my WBS all, I can just take the element ID name, and rather than listing it, I'm going to go ahead and count the distinct values. So here I know for WBS1 I have 13 elements. And this is already connected to my model. So if I actually select a row here, let's go into X-ray, and I can see this is selecting the items in the model as well. Let's remove the zoom also, so it doesn't move around as much. And there we have it. Everything is complete. Now, this is already pretty good. The final thing I could do is I could add in a bit of a filter. So if here I add some dates. So let's do the actual start. So I'm going to filter everything based on the actual start. So I'm going to show it over here as a value. Let me format that just a little. So let's do a short date over here. Perfect. And finally, what I can do is I can add in a slicer. Let's make it occupy a sensible amount of space. I can shrink this. I don't actually need these properties now, so I can just shrink this up. Scroll this down a bit. There we have it. Okay, so in my filter, what I want to do now is add the actual start. Power BI already understands this is a date, and I probably want a date interval. And so also what I can do is I can just filter here, and this will filter my WBSs as well. And that way I have an easier way of interacting with all this information. Great. So in just a couple minutes, what we've done is we've started from some external data, my schedule data that was connected to nothing. I went through Navisworks, connected, or rather I should say, defined selection sets, and then exported the set data. Then we brought that into Power BI, which allowed us to connect that selection set data to my object IDs coming from Vcad, and now I have an interaction with the model itself based on my original schedule data. Now, this covers it for today. Thank you for joining us, and stay tuned for more videos on these sort of topics coming to Vcad.